And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
We are very excited to once again have on the podcast the organized play team, or at least members of it. We've got Tanya Woolridge. Welcome back, Tanya.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
All right.
Nice evening out here. No rain.
And we've got John Compton as well. Hi, John.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
The usual stresses and anxieties, but I just got to finish developing 1008, What Prestige is Worth, which sends the PCs to hell.
Oh.
Yeah, Matt Duvall did a lovely job on that one, and it's largely been a matter of polishing things up and adding even more ways for the PCs to hang themselves.
Now, is that title as meta as I think it is?
I mean, there are definitely ways to spend prestige points in this adventure. There are ways to get yourself thrown in an unfortunate prison of Disbatter's creation, but I'm sure that nobody in Pathfinder Society would go into a hostile place and just start punching without thinking about it. That's not the way of our organized play campaign.
Speaking of the organized play campaign, for any of our listeners who don't know who you are, could you each just briefly explain what you all do and what the organized play campaign is?
Yep, starting with Tanya.
I am the organized play manager. So I look at the entire campaign and do the volunteer side of it, do the programming side of it, work on the convention side of it, but leave the editorial to my counterpart, John.
So I'm the organized play lead developer. You'd mentioned just defining what organized play is. Organized play, unlike a home game, is a shared campaign where your character advances over the course of playing pre-written adventures that you can play anywhere in the world, whether it's game stores, libraries, conventions, or even at home with a select group of people. And the idea is that you can always pick up your character and move it to any other table and keep going with your story no matter what, all with shared house rules and the like. My side of it is I head the creative development, so any of the creation of storylines or outlining scenarios, developing them, so that's sort of like a detailed editing pass sort of thing, and just making sure that they are as excellent as possible. And I do this work with Michael Sayer and Linda Zayas-Palmer, as well as for Starfinder Society with Thurston Hillman.
Excellent. So that is really covering the basis of what organized play is, and I appreciate that because unlike the last couple of times you've been on, I'm actually out of the organized play loop. So I'm going to need you to re-explain a lot of things that I knew very well just a couple of years ago.
For shame, Costello. For shame.
Now, we are going to talk about how Pathfinder Society and the organized play program is playing into the second edition playtest that's going on right now. But before we do that, season 10?
We're on 10.
Yes.
Okay.
10.
The 11th year, 10th season, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
And
I know what I'm doing.
I have to do an FTC disclosure. I'm also a member of the volunteer staff for the organized play.
So, season 10 didn't pause for the playtest. So how is season 10 going?
Overall, it's been
Pretty well.
Yeah. Season 10, because we are leading up to Pathfinder Society's second edition and just Pathfinder second edition as a whole, has really been a way of us saying, okay, what are some of the storylines that not only need to get wrapped up, but that we have been dying to wrap up for a long time. And so we're taking a lot of big names, and basically this is our chance to say, okay, you, the one who has been laughing at us for 7 seasons and always, smoke bombing away, finally this is our chance to corner them. Or some of the long-running quibbles that players have had, and rightfully so, with parts of the organized play, with the Pathfinder Society in-world leadership, the Decemvirate. Decemvirate are these masked figures who are anonymous and are like, oh yes, totally do this thing. We don't mean anything sinister by all of the missions we give you.
Oh, thank goodness.
People have always been like, really? Is that really how this works? And we are at last taking an opportunity to really delve down into the Decemvirate, how they're operating, and what some of them are up to in a big way. So we're excited about a lot of these stories. right now, I mean, I mentioned we're going to hell, so this is also an opportunity to be like, what are some of the places we have not been in the campaign? Let's just check those off the bucket list right now. And hell happens to be a great one, in part because it ties into the Dark Archive story, which is one of our big NPCs who has also been there since day one, taking her storyline and advancing it a little bit more, as well as bringing in some fun player choice as to what her role might be going forward.
Yeah, you all have kind of been partying like it's $37.99.
Oh yeah.
So does that mean?
I think that was.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tanya.
I was gonna say, from an organizational standpoint, my big goal on this one was to give players payoff and to make them feel like the last 11 years has really counted for something before we said, okay, now pivot, let's start something new.
Mm-hmm. How big of a pivot are we talking about? Is this going to be Pathfinder Society Volume 2? Is it going to be a complete reboot of the whole thing? What's going to happen in that regard?
You're going to be seeing basically more of a Pathfinder Society Volume 2. The campaign as a whole, as well as the campaign setting across all of Paizo, is not doing any large jump. We're not suddenly firing forward 50 years from now, at which point most of your characters are retired. We're not having some sort of immense event that shakes up an entire continent and just like, all right, we've decided these 15 countries don't exist. That's not the way that we're taking it. We are, however, sort of snapshotting forward some of the storylines that we had left uncertain as to how they had ended. And we're saying, okay, that adventure path that had happened 10 years ago, what was the canonical end of that so that we can continue moving forward with the campaign storyline? So the last year of the organized play program is 4719, and Pathfinder Society's second edition starts up at the latter half of 4719. So we are going to be dealing with some of the ramifications of what's happening in Season 10 and even before. And you're going to see a lot of continuity, both in terms of the NPCs and some of the storylines or plot threads carrying over.
Is there going to be any in-world justification for why suddenly silver pieces is the main denomination of coin?
We've been aiming for more continuity catch-ups for other topics, but so far currency's not been one of them. I am intrigued to hear what the answer to that one is. I'm sure I can whip that out in a meeting and just watch James be flabbergasted.
I mean, the economy's just
I'm
declining.
just trying to figure out if it means that the economy's doing super well or super poorly.
At that point, it would mean that silver pieces have gained in value. So, it might just mean that we have found so much money that we have. No, we would have lost money to deflate the value and make silver pieces more valuable. Uh-oh. Recession.
I think we may be able to handle this, though, in story arc. But, I'll leave that one up to John, as it is story and creative side.
I like that it's now an arc. It's not just something that's going to be casually mentioned. It's like, yeah, rust monsters went wild one day in all the banks. No, we've got a whole story arc now, John. You're welcome.
I already have few enough slots to tell these.
I just thought you all really lowered the bar on hiring new agents.
That could be too, but this is affecting the whole world.
Yeah, so entry-level salaries gone
living
down.
wages.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But part of our team's goal has been, where we can, to do things in story instead of just making those caveats and saying this is how it is, GM Fiat.
So you went from 3.5 to Pathfinder, or however, I could say 3.5. You can deal with whatever the legal ramifications of being on the Paizo side of that sentence is. So it's not like this is the first time that Pathfinder Society has had an edition change. So why is there also going to be like a larger scale change and like a wrap up of a lot of the ongoing events this time?
So Pathfinder Society, when it shifted from Season 0, which was using Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 adapted rules, to the full Pathfinder RPG rules, had a couple of differences. First off, the change from 3.5 to Pathfinder was much more incremental. Another one was that there was only 1 year of material really to be going off of at that point in time. So the idea of saying, okay, let's just keep on going and do this little nudge mechanically was a lot more viable. And so there wasn't the whole weight of, oh, but look at all the head start that all these other players got on me. Well, I mean, at that point, there were only 28 scenarios out at the point of transition, so there wasn't as much to catch up on. At this point, we have closer to, I think, like 250, 300 scenarios. And so the idea of saying, okay, welcome to second edition of the Pathfinder Society campaign. All these people who've been here for 10 years are way ahead of you. You'll never see them again. They're doing their own thing. But if you want to play First Steps Part 4, that's totally cool. Really, we want to establish more of a common entry point into this campaign so that everybody can be experiencing it from the beginning together. And so when we look at what sorts of adventures we're doing, we have to consider what are the tiers of play, so the levels of play that we're doing. And if we were to do a full over transition with like, take all of your characters, go into Pathfinder Society 2nd Edition with them, we would have some people showing up with 18th level characters. But when we have to create a schedule for the season, especially when we're starting off a new campaign, we want to start off with as much entry-level content as possible, so somebody just starting up has plenty to play. If we were to, like we launched in August, if we were to have in September a 15th level game that we just published, anybody who is starting fresh would have zero chance of being able to play that. So if it were heading like level 15 through 18, for example, only those people who had that high-level character carried over would touch it. Those with a 14th level character wouldn't be able to access it. Those with a 19th level character wouldn't be able to access it. It's way better for us creating a new campaign to be able to say, let's all start from square one, level-wise, and that way we can create all this great intro content and we can slowly expand the range of level tiers over time so that your characters continue to play and grow, not get stranded.
In addition, and from a program standpoint, we've had 10 years of implementation and learning from that. And we were able to take some of those lessons and try them out in Starfinder. And now we're taking the lessons we learned from launching Starfinder Society and putting back into Pathfinder Society version 2.
And Starfinder Society has been like almost universally praised as like some of the best organized play going. So I'm glad to see that you're looking at that for inspiration. I mean, well, otherwise, job well done, team. So what have you learned?
Thank you.
What have you learned from Starfinder? Oh, sorry.
One of the things we did was we collapsed our tiers. We made them tighter just because that odd middle level always kind of felt, where do I go and how do I do it? And it caused some numbers woes on our players and our GMs. So we're looking at keeping that kind of collapsed tier piece. One of the things I do want to say, though, is not everything that we try out in Pathfinder Society version 2 will necessarily go back to Starfinder Society. We are making some changes and some jumps even from what we did in Starfinder Society. It's not a guarantee that a new change that we'll introduce in August will go backwards. They might. We're leaving that one open.
Can I just pause for a second, Tanya? Can we do a delay test, a lag test?
Okay.
So when I say make some, you say noise. Make some?
Noise.
Make some?
Noise.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, that's about a 3-second delay.
Oh, goodness.
Which is just awkward enough that we're going to be stepping all over each other's first sentences. Param, how do you want to handle it?
The safest route is for Tanya to just exit out of the call and then just rejoin it. Sometimes that tells Skype to get its act together.
Okay, we'll do.
And the screen's going to get really funny, guys and gals in the audience. So just hang on a moment.
John, if you want to say anything off the record. You're still in front of a live audience. Don't do it. Resist the urge is what I was getting at.
And my goodness. Hello, chat. This is a great time for us to say that, hey, if you're in chat right now and have any questions for us or our guests, to get them in there. We'll be going throughout the chat throughout the show, plucking out questions and introducing them to to our guests to see if we can get some answers.
Tanya should be joining us any second now.
All right. Did that work?
You are back. Your video is not yet, but we'll give that about 5 or 10 seconds.
Oh, there's a lot of love for Starfinder Society in the chat right now.
All right.
Yeah.
Sound
Good
check.
job with that.
When I say make some, you say noise. Make some.
Noise.
Make some.
Noise.
Well,
Better, but it's not the smoothest.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, we're good?
well, we're good as we're gonna get.
All right.
Okay.
John, you were talking about wrapping up a lot of the loose plot threads. Did you have enough heads up that this is the direction that it's going to be, this like change in, or what should I be calling this shift from season 10 to season 11? A change in direction, like a changing of the guard?
I mean, from a narrative perspective, it's opening a new chapter.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so with the closing of this chapter, do you feel like you got enough head start that you could plot out enough of the conclusions that you feel players will be expecting?
The vast majority, at the very least. There are always going to be a couple things that we just don't have the slots to be able to hit, and some of those are even a matter of making sure that we are getting the right level range for a given storyline. So there are a couple of things that we have had to just sort of set to the side and say, okay, we only had so many level 7 to 11 scenarios, and we have so many +3 of these threads that we want to follow up on. Which of these are we going to focus on? But we've known we've known that something like this was coming for a while now. And so we've had some ideas in the back of our mind as to how we wanted to wrap it up. But one of the ways that the process works in the office is we tend to have these 40% of the way there placeholder ideas for a long time that have just back burner. We're like, oh, one day. And we bring in all these terrible nicknames as placeholders. So, okay, this will involve Old Litchy Pants, or this will be Big Bad Doofus Face the Third. And for a year, these will be the placeholder names until we kind of figure out what is Doofus Face even doing this whole time. And then suddenly we have a meeting where we're like, okay, it's down to the point where we need to really outline this next scenario. Have we decided what Doofus Face is doing? Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, yeah, we can make this happen. Oh, everything's falling into place. Everything's lovely. And that there are certain parts of season 10 that have been like that, and certain parts of season 10 we've known exactly how they would go for the past 2 or 3 hypothetical years, just knowing that one day when we're wrapping everything up, this is how it's going to be. So is there enough time to wrap things up? In a way, there is never enough time to wrap things up because these stories just keep on telling themselves in a way, and they keep on begetting new story threads. But is there enough for us to wrap up a whole pile of things and do it in a really cool, flashy way by the end of July? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Man, this is going to be a killer special this year.
We have a question from chat that is going to lead into a different... anyway, I'm going to expand on it. So first, Fiddler's Green PFS asks, he says, what do we want? Playable cat races? When do we want it? Meow. And the follow-up to that is that do you have any boons or whatever from, let's say, Pathfinder Society Chapter 1, things that players would be really happy with but would more or less break the game if this wasn't the last chance you had to implement them?
Oh, sort of things that we wouldn't have allowed unless we knew that we were starting to wrap up the first edition campaign?
Exactly.
I mean, I think that there are things that could be the case for mechanically. There are some things for which that could kind of be the case thematically. And certainly some of the second edition direction that the company has taken has opened the door a little bit more for some of those experiments. For example, second edition introduces goblins as a core playable race, or ancestry in this case. And once goblins are on the table, then we start to really look back at all the people who have for 5+ years been saying, so kobolds? When kobolds? And say, you know what? Kobolds. Yeah, we can do kobolds. So I think from the examination of some of these ancestries and saying, do these always have to be the things that we run into dungeons and punch in the face? A lot more often the answer is no. Let's tell an interesting story about that. So we even have a couple of fun ones that have featured goblins, and we have a couple more that are going to feature goblins because we're really keen on exploring what is the niche of goblins, as well as many others that goblins are sort of a little microcosm for.
Though to answer the catfolk question, I would say meow, 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 meow.
That Tanya, we are live. We can't edit that out.
Front page on N-World tomorrow.
Oh.
All right. We have another question from Dungeon Novice. Is, as somebody who's never played Society, would they be better waiting until 2E started, or can they start playing now?
Play now. Play forever. Play everything.
Yeah. So although
there's no room to wait. I was gonna say, we're looking at a way that we want you to enjoy Society. If you come in now, you might be a little bit behind some of the storylines, but you'll know more going into 2. And we've got some plans for crossovers and things that are going to happen between the in terms of benefits and a few other things.
From the perspective of creating scenarios, we always try to develop and edit them in such a way that even if you were to pick it up without any other context except a little bit of world knowledge, like we expect you to know what the Pathfinder Society is, that we introduce the main little storylines with at least a sentence or two of what is the context here? Why is this thing relevant? So the same thing is certainly going to be true for second edition. In fact, we'll probably be starting up plenty of more storylines that you can follow from the very beginning. But no matter where it is that you jump into the organized play campaign, the idea is that we're providing enough context that you'll be able to enjoy the story, not only for what it is right now, but also for how it connects into some other things. And there might be some more that if you had experienced every single scenario, you'll notice a couple of little internal Easter eggs that you're like, oh, but doesn't that mean that this, and then implies that? Oh my gosh, discoveries. But there's more than enough capacity to enjoy Pathfinder Society, no matter where it is that you jump in the storyline.
We've been touching up on goblins. Now, how are goblins going to be able to explore, cooperate, and report if they can't write down their reports without the thoughts being stolen from their minds?
I think we start to get into some of that, although I think that there's going to be some more exploration of this in future Pathfinder 2nd Edition material. But we have definitely presented goblins as a monolith in terms of every goblin hates writing, every goblin hates horses, every goblin wants to just throw a dog off a cliff. And there's the potential that what we have been looking at has been a subset of goblin cultures, whereas in some cases, those particular cultural aspects might not exist, or in some cases might exist in a different way. And that's one of the scenarios that we're having coming up is, what if you have goblins in a much different part of the world where hatred of dogs, hatred of horses, fear of writing, things like that, are actually adaptive strategies instead of just superstitions. So when it comes to the goblins that are going to be joining the Pathfinder Society, though, there's still going to be the understanding that any goblin who joins the society is able to perform the vast, vast majority of the expectations, or at the very least be able to do something to kludge what they don't do. So even if your goblin happens to be one who really prefers not to write anything down, there's still the understanding that your goblin would be in some way reporting back to the society what he or she found. So expect that we're going to be doing a little bit of explanation and a little bit of examination as far as what the in-world ramifications of goblins are. But by no means do the goblins' traditions rule them out entirely.
Chat kind of exploded with both sides of the argument, saying yay for goblins writing and someone just wanting pictographs. So I have a feeling you're going to get some interesting reactions when those scenarios start to come out.
Oh yeah, and I can imagine that Ambrose Valson is going to be like, so I got your report. Llama, camel, bird. What does this mean? Because I'm pretty sure I just sent you to the land of the Norm Kings where there are no camels. And at that point, it's a sit-down talk, and Ambrose Valson can gruelingly record what it is that you found.
Now, I know the answer here, Costello. It's our 14th podcast, The Goblins Report.
Hold on, sorry. You're suggesting that goblins are going to start a podcast in Galarian?
Well, yeah.
And we're going to host it on the network? Just trying to follow the logic of your statement.
Well, this is completely possible under the official canon of Pathfinder, though they'll have to wait about 70 years.
I don't remember seeing podcasts ever referenced in any of the rule books, not even Ultimate Equipment.
Yeah, honestly, we have a hard enough time creating sending stones to past 25-word messages.
Because messages range is like 100 feet.
Yeah.
You have to have a network of thousands of people in a line to hopefully broken telephone your message back home.
1,000 goblins, 1,000 first-level goblin bards, all able to cast message. Ugh.
I don't want to see the end of that telephone line.
Well, by the end, it'll be llama, llama, camel, bird.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Hillary Moon Murphy asks, and we'll see just how detailed you can get here, which NPCs will be continuing into the new chapter?
Complicated question. So for some of these are ones where some of our scenarios that are coming up, including even one of the ones I was just working on, help to inform us what some of these NPCs are. Some of them are also ones where they have been in place for a long time and we're looking at having them step back a bit. Some of these are ones who over the past several years have had different turns of events that have made them have to step back from the spotlight or step into the spotlight. So we're always changing up a little bit of that, but I would expect to see plenty of familiar faces once we start the second edition, and also some new ones, because we want to shake things up a bit.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the new Pathfinder Society, has it been decided if this going to be Season 11 or Season 1 of PF2? How are we supposed to refer to the new one?
It's Season 1. We are resetting the numbers and going back.
Couldn't you do Season -1 just so that, we keep that needing to really explain that Season 10 is Season 11? Like, that's really near and dear to my heart.
No, I mean, technically you could call this playtest kind of our Season 0
Yes!
for it, if you have to have that justification.
All right, so Season 1, is it Season 1, Chapter 2? I really like the idea of Chapter 2.
We are kind of on hold for discussing that internally with our team until they decide what we are calling Pathfinder Virtue, because we will play off of whatever that happens. We know it's going to be Pathfinder Society, but whatever that moniker is after it, edition, version 2, chapter 2, has to wait until we hear from the company at large what our messaging is.
Yeah, this is the comic collector in me coming out, where they've just stopped giving subtitles to comic series, and we have to find our own way of defining when one series ends and another begins. Usually you say the creative team, but that doesn't apply here. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm anxious to know just what vocabulary I am allowed to use.
Video games have started using just the year.
That doesn't always apply. Like, there were 2 Squirrel Girl #1s in the same year at one point.
And since we're coming out in the middle of the year, do we go with 4719, 2019? I don't know that one's going to be the choice. But we will put it in a blog as soon as we make our final decision and we've got something to go forward with.
And that's not the... this might be a little bit of a tangent, but that's not the only big change that you all have talked about. At the PaizoCon this year, you introduced the concept of the Organized Play Foundation. Could you talk about that topic and what that means?
We can. Been up in the air a little bit, but we've gotten a few more solid facts and a few more decisions done. It is its own organization with its own board that meets. Being a nonprofit, they're working with volunteer side of it so that they can provide us volunteers for our organized play. But as well, the hope is that Organized Play Foundation will become an umbrella for all volunteers working on games, organized play for any game, tabletop, role-playing. If someone wants to start a video game organized play program, maybe they'll do that. And that one volunteer, it's a one-stop shop for the volunteer. They can go in and they can say, well, I like game system X, game system Y, Paizo, and these are all the ones that I want to volunteer for. And then they take that common knowledge and they send it out to the different programs. So on Paizo's side, we will produce the program content, and the Organized Play Foundation will organize the volunteer, and together we will have a program.
So, wow, that is a much larger scope than I realized. Is this something like, has an outreach program begun, or is this a 5 years down the line plan?
I've been acting interim executive director for the last few months, and I've been talking to other companies and reaching out and putting feelers there. Given the scope of it and given where my interests lie, decision was to look for an executive director for OPF that would be its own, and I am remaining on at Paizo as the program manager, because there's enough moving parts that aren't creative that still need to get done in a day, and there's someone that needs to liaison between the volunteers and our systems, and so that's where I'm transitioning into, and we will for an executive director. How the Organized Play Foundation is going to go about putting out for that, that's the board's decision. And I would look for more information or potentially a press release on that when they're ready to go forward.
All right, we will put a pin in that, and I look forward to having that conversation in a future episode, because this has me very intrigued. Another question from chat. Hillary Moon Murphy wants to know, will players be able to be part of more than one faction, like in Starfinder?
So we don't have any final decisions on that one yet. One of the things that we've been doing since the announcement of Pathfinder 2nd Edition in March is that we've been soliciting feedback from the community on a wide variety of topics. I think we have 8 big ones, but factions and fame is one of them. So far, Starfinder Society has done really well with allowing people to be part of multiple factions or to swap between factions at the drop of a hat. And really, that is strongly the direction that we are going right now for Pathfinder's 2nd Edition. But there are a lot of things that we haven't formally in capital letters nailed down, because we're still pulling in a lot of feedback from the community through Paizo.com discussions, as well as a whole bunch of surveys that we've posted along with a bunch of our blogs. So, but that is, factions overall is definitely one of the points where we're looking to shake things up a bit.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the feedback you've been collecting, Twilight Knight 421 has asked if you've had the chance to evaluate the feedback on the Chronicles survey, and if so, is there any announcement on the decisions that you'll be taking with Chronicle sheets in PF2?
So looking at survey data has definitely been an experience in terms of saying, okay, this one turned out the way we kind of were thinking it was. Oh, this one, not as much. Or, oh, wow, the community sure is split on this one topic. That was not the case on Chronicle Sheets. Chronicle Sheets has had a very clear message. Just to summarize, we have been exploring different ways to record the outcomes of different adventures for a player-by-player basis. In the past, we have had a single sheet of paper called a Chronicle Sheet that has all the information of like how much gold, how much experience, what items did you find. We started looking at smaller ones as a way of saving some paper, compressing some of that information. By and large, though, people were not excited about it. They were much more interested in option number 1 from our blog, which was a full-size sheet of paper that broke things up and reorganized things a little bit from what we had in first edition. Including like putting an adventure summary up toward the top. That way you always have a little reminder of what the story was. And that is almost certainly the direction that we're going with that one. There was very strong feedback on that front.
There's also been a lot of feedback on the weight of carrying Chronicles around over the years, and that's why we kind of looked at smaller versions and less of them. And so we've been exploring options with one of our tech coders on going digital and having an ability to put some of this online in a way that you could get into the system and then pull it out. Things are promising right now, but we're just starting that discussion and starting to put this together. So it's a tune in later to see where we've gotten with it.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I first started with Pathfinder Society, I just assumed that all that stuff would be online. And this is like 10, 11 years ago, so it was a high expectation at the time. But I guess this changing of the chapter is also an opportunity for you to dump some baggage of how logistically things are implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And speaking of logistical baggage in the literal sense, has there been any update on making it more convenient, especially for digital players or people who purchase digital content, of supporting the requirement that you have the product that you use on your character? Because some of my players, if they were to take that quite literally, it would be a duffel bag that weighs 400 pounds that they brought with them for their very special snowflake.
We moved to accepting a PDF version on a digital device as long as you were willing to show the digital device to the GM or let the GM touch it, because we can't take liability for something being broke at the table. But if you want to do PDFs and use those, we went with that. We also now take a printout of your My Downloads to show that you have a copy of it, or a copy of like a picture of the book with your receipt. You can add and show it. And now with the partnership with Archives of Nethys, with the PFSRD and the SFSRD, those become more viable because you can show a picture of your book and your receipt and then pull the information from the official SRD.
When did that get implemented? I hadn't heard about that.
A season ago, it appeared in the guide. I went to a convention and someone had to carry my bag of stuff and I almost broke their neck. And since then, we've been trying to find a way to make things lighter because if I'm having those problems, the community's having them. So let's try and figure out how to reduce weight. And when one only has a 20-pound carry-on, I don't want to take 15 pounds of it up with their gaming supplies.
One of the general surveys related to organized play is the pre-generated character survey. Now, I know people have definitely had their thoughts on the pre-generated characters for PFS in the past. What kind of feedback have you been getting there?
So this is another one where, with the help of one of our graphic designers, Emily Crowell, she's been very patient in creating multiple versions of all sorts of the paperwork that we've been doing. Pre-generated characters is far and away the most involved of those. So she's created a landscape version, she's created portrait version, she's created a version that was based on feedback that we'd received from first edition saying, why do you have pre-generated characters that don't look exactly like the character sheet you have in the back of the core rulebook? So we said, you know what, fine, here's a pre-generated character that's done exactly like that. And we put them all on a blog probably about 2-3 weeks ago. And starting up a survey to get your feedback on those. And one of the big push-pulls on pre-generated characters is always, how much information do you put on there? Because the more we put on there, not only the more pages that are involved and the more shuffling you have to do, and the more printing there is, but on the other hand, it's, oh gosh, it sure would be nice to run this pre-generated character without having to reference the book at the table, where if I'm a new player or just trying things out, I don't have that book at the table. So space versus information, huge fight. Right now, the fight in terms of the pre-generated characters based on our survey data is largely landscape or portrait mode. People for portrait say, well, for portrait mode, it takes up less space at the table. People for landscape mode say, landscape mode, it takes up less space at the table.
I need to see their tables.
So I think that one of the nice things about the later generation first edition pre-generated characters being in landscape is it did allow us to put in more information and incorporate art in a way that made much more efficient use of space. And with space being an issue, I, as a person, have a preference for landscape, but there's still a lot more sussing out of things that we need to do. By and large, though, the types of information that are showing up on the pre-generated characters have been going over pretty well. And we think that we have it down to a point where we can fit in the vast majority of what we need on the vast majority of characters for lower levels on 2 sheets. Once we get higher than that, we might have to get a little bit more creative. But tied into pre-generated characters, Tanya had mentioned earlier that we were looking at sort of compressing the tier range, the level range for any given scenario. One of the things that we've found that does in Starfinder, and especially in Pathfinder 2nd Edition with its slightly tighter math, is that the difference between one level and another is slightly more pronounced. And so having a first level pregen and a fourth level pregen feels like it might be a little bit too extreme. We kind of want something in the middle. So what we're currently tossing around internally is the idea of having a first level pre-generated character, a fifth level pre-generated character, and maybe let's tentatively say a ninth level pre-generated character just for funsies, and have those for all of our classes. But we need to fill in the gaps a little bit. We already know through painful experience that doing 3 levels of pre-generated characters is already a major undertaking, especially when we release things like the Advanced Class Guide, where it's suddenly, surprise, 10 more of these guys, ready for Gen Con, go! So what we're looking to do, or currently exploring, and we'll be soliciting feedback on this no doubt, is having for like the level 3 and 7 in between, just having a smaller array of pre-generated characters, not the full array of classes, in there in case you need something for that sub-tier. That way we're not leaving you stranded in a like tier 3-4 adventure with a first level character who's going to get run over. But you might have to, you'll have to play an alchemist, fighter, sorcerer, I'm making up classes as I go, and maybe not play a druid at 3rd level, but at 5th level, sure. So we're looking at ways that we can expand the range of pre-generated characters without committing ourselves to an impossible level of depth to the variety at every level.
I don't know why you're wasting all this time on all the other characters. Everybody just ends up playing Kira anyway.
Somebody ends up playing Kira.
Sorry.
I think my favorite commentary and feedback we got on him was in 1st edition, you had landscape pregens and portrait character sheets. And posited portrait pregen, they were like, but now your character sheets are landscape. Could you never get them the same? So
we're just trying to give you the best possible product and experience.
Exactly. So we do listen. You. We really do listen.
Including to the snark.
I'm just checking through some of the chat questions. Imperious Soar is wondering, what are the breakdown of specials going to look like between the end of PFS Season 10 and PFS 2 Season 1?
Between those, that would suggest basically what are our multi-table, or what do our specials look like for July and August of 2019? Unless it's like, what does the first year of 2nd edition specials look like? Either way, I can provide a solid answer. So in launching Starfinder Society, we basically said to ourselves, look, everybody's going to be learning this system come Gen Con. And interactive specials are not a great way to learn a system. It's very fast-paced, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of distraction going on. And so for Starfinder Society, what we ended up doing is we said, you know what, let's release some scenarios, and we will also release a pre-generated character special. This is an adventure that has a list of pre-existing characters that you choose from at the table rather than playing your own character. And what we did with this is we created a 4th level adventure using our pre-generated characters. And the idea was, oh, hey, look, everybody's going to be bringing in a 1st level character at Gen Con. This will give people a taste of what it means to play something a little higher level. And it also lets us play a little bit of a sort of a prologue story, tell a little bit different side of the action. Looking ahead, that really seemed to work out pretty well for Starfinder Society, and that is one of the things that we're looking to carry over for Pathfinder Society 2nd Edition's launch. So will there be an interactive special at Gen Con 2019 for 2nd Edition? No, there will not be that. We are looking to have a pre-generated character special, though, that'll do a higher level sort of experience, as well as a bunch of lower level scenarios that you can play right outside of the gate. Then when we start to look ahead to Gen Con 2020, or maybe even a little earlier if we want to explore it for PaizoCon, so far haven't really touched on it, that's when you can expect to start seeing a multi-table interactive special. Because by that point, everybody has their legs under them. Everybody is hopefully higher than level 1. And we have a much more established story that we've picked up for that season to do some sort of big event with. Whereas for launching the campaign, we really just want to give you consistently good adventures that you can play at your own pace.
This is probably
That
something
does
that you're...
mean,
go
though,
ahead.
that we will have 3 specials at Gen Con. One of them will be launching PaizoCon, and John's mentioned it several times in some panels and pieces. We've been referring to it internally as the grinder. If he wants to stop some, I'll that to him. But we will be doing that one on one evening. We will have the Starfinder Society special on another evening, which will be an interactive. And then we'll have this narrated special Pathfinder Society 2 on the 3rd evening.
Given all of John's evil illusions during this interview, I am foreseeing why there's going to be such a need for new Pathfinders come season 2.
I mean, so Starfinder Society storyline started off with the idea of the Scoured Stars, which a lot of people really caught on to was a multi-table interactive special that went horribly wrong. Like, we always have these interactive specials where it's like, okay, defend the city, or, oh gosh, the Grand Lodge is under attack. And to an extent, like, even if the whole group is not doing really well, the assumption is, okay, we fought it off barely. As opposed to, well, we didn't do well enough, the Grand Lodge burned down. Or, well, we lost that country. The Scoured Stars seems to be one of those things where you went in and it went horribly wrong, and we just basically came over the microphone and was like, well, sorry, Starfinders, everybody's dead. Pack up and go home. Is kind of what happened in World. The Grinder is not quite that, because the Grinder's idea is that it's a multi-table interactive special for currently level 5 through 15 characters. So first level characters need not apply. The idea is also that you are bringing multiple characters. So if one of your characters happens to get horribly mutilated, then you can bring in a replacement. Or if one of your characters is about to get horribly mutilated, you can pull up your -3 character and say, but wait, Rango the Bard sure did jump in front of that bullet. Tear up Rango the Bard. Oh, Rango the Bard, we'll miss you, but thanks for sparing my first character. We're basically trying to make sure that there are a variety of ways for you to take your first edition characters and provide them a range of satisfying conclusions. In the case of our Final Seeker arc, we're looking at one particular method. In the case of the Grinder, it's what if we were to do something that made us go out with a bang, like a bloody bang, but it wasn't just a bloody bang where we said, well, too bad that didn't work out. No, it's a bloody bang where we say, oh my gosh, we did that. That was us. Like, we're going to be referencing this throughout the 2nd edition campaign the entire time. And all the like NPCs are going to be like, oh man, oh, they were the heroes. And I'll know that was me. Ooh. That's more what we're aiming for with the Grinder. So even though, yes, Rango the Bard, your noble -3 Bard, went kablooey, it was for a good cause. You know, you stopped something way worse.
You basically are reducing Rango the Bard to a hero point.
I mean, Rango the Bard has always been much more than a hero point to me. Rango the Bard has been at least 2 hero points. So don't sell him short. Like, 7 levels of experience. Is that all I am, a hero point to you?
Could have been 15.
Yeah, like, we've had bonkers ideas with this one, and partly they've been like, could we have the technology to work with that? Like, the idea of, like, you know, Xbox and PlayStation have these, like, trophies that pop up. The idea of our reporting system in the middle of the Grinder just being something where it's like, anytime a character dies, write the name, race, and class of that character and level. And that way we could be like, oh, look, guys, you see this grayed out image of a fox head with, like, an X over it? Oh, wonder what that trophy could be. And suddenly a cry goes up from the house being like, kill more Kitsune characters. Let's get that trophy. You know, that's the sort of thing that we're just like, oh, that would be a precious moment of community. So we'll see what we can quite pull off on that front. But either way, the story is going to be pretty spectacular.
So just to parse the theoretical from the plans, is the ripping up Rango the Bard that much is more or less set in stone?
The idea that your character has permanently bit the bullet and died, yes.
Now, is there an alternative if I'm sitting at a 15th level table, lose my 15th level character, can I then swap to my 5th level Rango? Or 7th level, I guess?
You sure could.
At the same table? Like playing in the same
table. Let's compare cruelties. There's the cruelty of introducing a 7th level character to a 15th level table. But logistically, there's the cruelty of saying, scoot over other table that I have never been a part of. I'm playing my 7th level character here now. Logistically, that is terrible. We want to avoid that. So, no, it's basically, all right, do you have a character who is equal or lower level? Bring them in.
I like the logistics of cruelty you've just spelled out for us.
These are the sorts of terrible bargains that we have to bring up during our meetings.
Really? Terrible bargains. You've got quite the smile on your face right now, John.
Considering, again, I just finished up a scenario that sends you to hell, in which case you can make dark bargains. And so I have infernal ideas all across my mind.
Mm-hmm. You need to take a break. You need to just watch some Care Bears or something. Get back to your old mindset.
As if Care Bears is a step up.
Now, I've got a question.
That stare's just creepy.
I've got a question for you, Tanya, on this one, and it's in the spirit of the grinder, but more of the practical grinders that you all have to do at conventions. It's now been 11 years of doing this, and do you have any favorite harrowing stories of we can't believe we pulled this off for organizing?
No, not really, because the teams that work these events are so fantastic. We've had some late nights. Especially at Gen Con in the SEG 3 in the morning, knowing we're opening those doors at 7 and just trying to get the last things put together. But really, huge kudos to the organizers that put these events together. They allow us to come out and enjoy society in a thing that get to see in the office as much, and just breathe and relax. And I couldn't do the ones that Paizo sponsors without the help of the organizing teams. But even down to the one-day cons in a game store, they still need someone to take the helm, and they really do a wonderful job at it. It's a pleasure to go out and meet people and say hi and kick back and relax. So I think the one I was worried most about was just this trip to PaizoCon Asia Pacific, and only because I thought everything in Australia was trying to kill me, because that's what I had been told. Mm-hmm. So, I was worried about the location, more worried about the event firing in a positive way. They knocked it out of the park. It was a blast. Nothing tried to kill me, though I did avoid some jellyfish on the beach the day after.
Kangaroos are surprisingly dangerous. I am going to put that out there. They are like 8 feet tall, and they don't care if they plow you over.
I walked into the pen. They were only about 4. They gave me the small ones, but I kept my distance. It was, you lay on if you stand up, I'm moving. Because, yeah.
If there's a pen, those are the broken kangaroos.
Yeah. It was hot out. It's going into their summer, so.
Do we have new kangaroo pictures we can use to replace the one with Jason Bowman petting a kangaroo?
I think we do. I'll have to look through my phone, but I was snapping some good pictures. That the one I enjoyed taking and sending back to everyone was the big, giant American crocodile that walked about 20 feet. They had him in an electric fence because he was so big, and you stood on a thing and looked down at him, so you weren't anywhere near. Because I was like, you know what? I just ran out of the crocodile. That's what you were facing.
Yeah. Now, crocodiles are dangerous. They are dinosaurs that basically said extinction. Nah.
Exactly.
Param, you want to ask some questions about the second edition scenarios that we have out?
Yeah, how has okay, so the second edition scenarios have been fairly well received. A lot of people have enjoyed them and seeing kind of what second edition can do in like a more traditional adventure format. How has the feedback been with those so far?
Overall, pretty good. There have been a couple of weird glitches as we've been getting used to the system. I understand, for example, like playtest scenario number 4 has a really weird interpretation of how to handle one of the later rooms that has led to some really curious deaths. But overall, they've been pretty good. And some of the things that we chose to focus on in them have even been ones where we were like, you know what? This was a pain in the butt in first edition. So let's see how it rolls in second edition. Because if it's easier to deal with, if it's a little bit less of a trial to deal with particular flying creatures that force a will save infamously, then that'll be a great thing to show to the fans. And so far, some of those have been a lot easier and have demonstrated that second edition has worked out pretty well on that front. Some of them have definitely reinforced that, oh no, this sort of thing is still very dangerous. And that's one of the benefits of having sort of a, you know what, no matter how the scenario went, you're still getting credit for this sort of playtest. We're looking for the feedback. We're not looking to kill off one of your characters permanently, and we're still very much finding our own legs in terms of adventure design as far as the new edition's concerned. Working on Rose Street Revenge was my first time digging into second edition beyond like adapting an adventure path for a playtest or building a character, and seeing, oh wow, when I'm developing a scenario, suddenly this thing is really hard, or this thing is way easier, and that suddenly turns into great feedback for the design team to work with. So I think it's been a great experience having these playtest scenarios. I think we've gotten some really good stuff out of it, but I also recognize that several of them have had scenes that have been a lot harder to handle at the table than we would have wanted. So we are hearing that feedback and using that to shape how we design scenarios going forward. Because we will make sure that those ones that we launch at August 2019 at Gen Con are as great as possible.
Was the idea in the development of these just developed in the same way you would a first chapter Pathfinder Society scenario, or were you looking forward to opportunities to develop an adventure differently based on the opportunities that Pathfinder Second Edition playtest version presents?
Anytime that we have new mechanics that come out, we're always keen to kind of poke at them and experiment with them and organize play. Sometimes that, for example, that's been a subsystem in a hardcover book. Like, the influence subsystem was already in several Pathfinder Society adventures leading up to Ultimate Intrigue, but it was still a sort of thing where it's like, oh, now it's in print. Cool. Let's tinker with this a little bit. The idea of having things like exploration mode, downtime mode in Pathfinder Second Edition means that we start to look at those and say, okay, how can we make that a thing in Pathfinder Society? And so Rose Street Revenge in particular pokes at exploration mode, but really all of the adventures overall deal with exploration mode in some way or another, because we want to make sure that we have a good understanding of how that features. What parts of it are fun? What parts of it can we make even better?
I have very much enjoyed the snarky tutorial NPC for exploration mode. I think that's my player's favorite part every time I run that.
Yeah. So that's referencing the Dragon's Quest from Rose Street Revenge, which was really fun because it meant that we got to borrow some of the previous campaign's canon, and that was not only because it was going to make a fun story. That was kind of a deliberate choice. We wanted to make sure that we were conveying to our players, look, guys, the stories that we were telling in first edition still matter. We're still going to be seeing a lot of these folks, and two of these kobolds happen to be featured in this adventure. And I like that second kobold. I really have a soft spot for the first one, Engashez, though, because somehow the first time that I ran that one, it just sort of fell into this rhythm of like, all right, this will be you, this will be us, and then the people in the middle, we'll smash them. It'll be pinching them in the middle like a pincher attack, and then you and us, victory. Yes, good. And just violent clapping the entire time it's kind of been the order of the day.
Now, Now that you have had some experience working with the playtest version and how it's evolved, what are you discovering with organized play specifically, how the system is both easier and more difficult for GMs and players playing it for the short form organized play format?
Certainly earlier on, it was a little bit more questionable as to how healing was going to be handled, because we were still working with the original resonance system, but also in a place where clerics had a very, very clear advantage in healing, and there wasn't a lot of non-magical healing out there. Now that we have the bind wounds mechanic, that starts to be smoothed over a little bit, which is really nice, because I personally get really nervous anytime that we have a system that mandates a certain class balance. And I think that a lot of the changes that the design team has made over the course of the past 6 updates have really helped to broaden out what is possible. And that's really important when you have organized play, where you never know if you're going to show up at a table of 6 rogues. And if you do, kudos. So we have that. Exploration mode has been a bit of a tricky one, just because it has been a little bit unclear from an adventure creation standpoint. What does it mean if half of the PCs are using the sneaking tactic, but half of them aren't? What does it mean if all of them are? What does it mean if only one of them is? How does that quite change things up? And as we really drill down on the different ways of looking at exploration mode, as well as different possible revisions of exploration mode, there's a lot the design team might be doing that I'm not yet privy to. Those are things where we're really trying to make it a lot clearer for the GM to understand how exploration mode fits into how an encounter starts, or the like. So that's the trickiest bit for me right now.
Is some of the feedback you're getting for games being reported today still valuable, considering that the adventures were designed for a version of the rule system that has changed drastically since when they were written?
I think that the feedback still has value. I mean, yes, it would have even more value if we created a new version of the survey and we updated everything to reflect the latest version of the rules, but everything still holds up well. So if you do Rose Street Revenge, our first level quests, and you do it based on the playtest as written, cool. That is still giving us a lot of really good feedback, because we're still checking to see if, hey, overall, are the classes feeling about right? Did this still feel like Pathfinder to you? Was this a fun experience? Was this a challenging but still approachable experience? Cool. And if you're happening to run Rose Street Revenge with the 1.6 update rules, it's going to involve like some very minor changes to the adventure as written, but mostly that is going to be on the rules that you're using at the table and the types of characters that the players are bringing to the table. So you can still run Rose Street Revenge and using 1.6, and we can still get some feedback off of that as well.
One of the things that doing the playtest allowed us to do too was when design team needed to pivot and try out the new magic items and how that was going to go. We were able to snapshot and re-release Raiders of Shriek Peak. The group really wants to see the thought process of the design team and where they're going, play it once as originally published, and then play it again as the update was published, and see changes there, because that's how this game is morphing. We used the Society to get another version out where we couldn't change the entire Doomsday Dawn. It just wasn't feasible.
Speaking of some of the changes and things that might be easier, now that PF2 will conceivably make higher level play easier, is the default scope of level ranges for PFS Season 2 going to increase to match?
So basically, are you referencing what used to be considered the retirement level
Right.
of Pathfinder Society 1? Yeah, so this is going to probably track similar to what it's like for Starfinder Society, where as we have advanced further and further, and we have higher and higher level characters, we are gradually expanding the level range of scenarios that we're releasing. So, for example, in December, we're releasing our first tier 7 to 10 scenario because now we have characters of that level, and we have a reliable number of them. The same sort of thing is going to be true for Pathfinder Society 2nd Edition's launch. You're going to see a lot of tier 1-4, tier 3-6, even some 5-8 scenarios, but I wouldn't expect us to do a whole lot of high-level content because we want to make sure that we're not only providing enough scenarios to like level up a couple of characters to get to that point, but also that we are not flooding the community with adventures that they can't realistically access with their core characters until the right point. So yeah, we'll probably see all the way up through like 8th level content through the first season, depending upon quite how it maps out. We might do a little higher, but those are the sorts of things that we keep in mind when we're creating a season calendar.
I know that it always seems like it's been a juggling act for you figuring out the appropriate tier distribution of scenarios. So is this something you think you finally got the magic formula for?
For everything but season 10, mostly. The idea of doing a first level compatible adventure most months has worked out really well for us. So in a standard like 25 scenario season, usually about 10 of them have been tier 1-5. We've done something different with season 10 because we're trying to wrap things up where we only have a handful of level 1 things. But I would expect that it's going to be fairly common for us to release a first level compatible thing every month or close to every month, certainly for the first several seasons, and probably even pretty close to a bunch of the later ones. That's not really a model I see changing because even if you're a really experienced player, having some first level appropriate content means that you can bring in a lower level character, which means that you can play alongside a new player and help to show them the ropes and really build the community that you have in your area.
One of the problems with going above that level 12 in PFS1, and something that we have to keep in mind looking at too, is our conventions are 4 to 5 hour slots. And that's always been one of the prime motivators on how high we can go, because it's great to say, oh yeah, we can do this content that's level 18 and a combat take 4 hours, and a home game, that's okay. But at convention, we still have to deliver a full story in that time period. And so that's one of our constraints we have to watch, is when we hit that time versus level tips on the other balance, then we have to stop doing it.
And that's one of the reasons that we've really been curious about how long it takes to play higher level content in 2nd edition, is because if in fact it is smoothing gameplay at higher levels as much as we believe it is, and as much as I have generally seen the couple of times I've done it, then that makes it a lot more viable to do higher level play in an organized play format. Because as Tanya was saying, once you hit like level 13 or so, we found that play tends to slow down quite a bit as you resolve all sorts of complex things going on, which are spectacular, but complex. So opening that door for 2nd edition would be fantastic. Each of our surveys for our scenarios has a question for the GM of how long did it take to run this? And we're watching that as well to see, are we hitting like a 4-hour mark with these? Are we hitting a 5-hour mark with these? Because we want to make sure that we're making these approachable in terms of fitting into that 4-hour or 4+ hour slot, or 4 and a bit, I guess, slot. Because 5 hours does start to push it a bit.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we ran into, and the community as a whole ran into, when Starfinder recently launched its organized play campaign, was the players were very voracious and very quickly were content starved. What are your plans to combat that with PF2 launching?
So we have a couple different things. First off, just talking a little bit about what our production schedule looks like for the second half of 2019. So that'll be the launch of 2nd edition up through the first roughly 6 months. So what we're looking at doing is we'd be releasing 3 scenarios right out of the gates, along with the pre-generated character special, so like a 4th scenario. And on top of that, we're looking at doing something a little bit different every month. Rather than just releasing 2 scenarios every month, which for some people I totally recognize is still not enough. there's something that we've been really wanting to do in first edition that our current setup has not really allowed us to do in a meaningful way, and that is quests. In first edition, we have done what we've colloquially called quest packs, which are, okay, if you play these 4 to 6 quests together, then you get the benefits of having played a scenario. Because early on, quests were standalone, but it was, if you play this 1-hour quest, you'll get this chronicle sheet that gives you no gold, no experience points, no prestige points, but you will get this one-time use boon. And what we found, understandably in retrospect, is that people generally didn't want to spend an hour getting a single-use boon that would give them like a +1 to hit against a kobold once. So the idea of being able to make quests such a thing that people could play them and still earn gold, experience, prestige points, etc., has been big in our meetings, because we want to make these a part of things. And we've locked in some budget stuff for 2019, and quests are a part of that. Like a quest every month, so that whether you are sitting down in a game store and you have one of those game stores that's willing to run a little bit late, get you in that 4 hours of playtime, fantastic. If you just want to show up, though, you want to socialize for half an hour, sit down and play for an hour, hour and a half, however long it takes you to get through a quest, and then clean up and go home at a reasonable hour, we'll have some quests to do that too, and you'll still be able to advance your character. So we really want to expand on what the ranges of not only level play is, like higher level content, but we want to do that in terms of what does your commitment in this slot look like? And quests are a part of that.
Another part of that, are you guys going to be supporting playing PFS credit for Adventure Path play right out the bat?
That's another thing where we can look at how Starfinder Society handled it, which was we had Dead Sun's Adventure Path sanctioned and ready to go, I believe, day 1.
Yeah. We would like and have always had on our workflow getting the APs for PFS1. The current team, the organized play team, John, Linda, I, now Michael, Thirsty for Starfinder, we came in and we inherit PFS1. And I think that's some of the things we've been discussing a lot in the meetings are, what about this were we given that we've moved on and made decisions on? And what about this can we make? And how do we go about that? And Thirsty and John sanctioning Starfinder Society APs right out the bat was a big one, and I think that's where we're trying to keep it going.
And related, yes, we are still working on a bunch of the first edition content. I know that I have a final checks for Kingmaker that's sitting on my desk now that it's gone through copy fitting. And Michael's been working his butt off to get War for the Crown up and ready to go.
Nice. We have a couple of questions from chat that we should get to. Some of whom have been waiting for a while. Fiddler's Green PFS asked a question. This is related to the pre-generated characters. Would it be easier to invite the community to submit builds for pre-gens and choose from them instead of building them on your own, on Paizo Zone?
We can't,
Okay.
is the short answer. It is one of the things we found going back to Organized Play Foundation, why it's been formed. One of the goals for it is that we have to make a very clear delineation between what publishers publish content, and including the pre-gens, and what our community can do. And so we've spent a lot of time in our meetings sussing out where that dividing line is and kind of putting things in 2 columns. And unfortunately, pre-gens fall into that needs to be Paizo column.
One of the things that we've certainly learned, though, doing at this point like 3 or 4 different generations of pre-generated characters for first edition, is that there are certain things that are wonderful to have on these characters, like, you know, the feedback of a pre-generated character should have a wayfinder because they're part of the Pathfinder Society. That makes sense. Sure, it'd be nice if our pre-gens had more rope. That is great to know. We can put more rope on these things. My pre-gen doesn't have any way to write things down. Good point. And so that sort of feedback of things where it's less, here is a fully designed first level Mauricial for you to just take and publish, but rather a we would like to see more of this in the pre-generated characters. That is feedback that we can much more readily incorporate because this is community feedback rather than community-produced content that would then have Paizo's logo on it.
Is there any issue with just how generous pre-gens tend to be with their healing potions?
In terms of them not having enough of them?
No, they just always seem to be willing to give them up to anybody, like way more than anyone else in the party.
That's the trouble. Like the moment that you bring in one of these pre-generated characters, it's like they get a completely different life and personality of their own. I don't know how to. Like Kira, for example, pours so much of her time and emotional energy into buying these wands of cure light wounds, and then she shows up and she just drops it in somebody else's lap and never asks for it again. It's weird. Only time will tell.
Question for PFS1 from Atra02. When support ends, will additional resources be updated to allow some access to all PF1 books whose items were held back for future chronicle sheets, a la the Chronicles of the Righteous and Prestigious Spellcaster feat?
That's an interesting thought. Definitely we're still in the process of catching up with additional resources, which has been behind. Mm-hmm. But the idea of being able to say, okay, let's take a quick little glance at some of the things that are banned and say, oh, okay, let's bring back
Vivisections.
X, Y, and Z. Oh boy, Vivisections. I can't tell what your favorite is, Ryan. The idea of being able to that had not crossed my mind. It's a possibility. I do wonder quite what the time footprint is. I also wonder if that's something, Tanya, that's something that we could say, like, hey, community, or hey, volunteer corps, could you just do a review of this and recommend some things for us? Okay, yeah, it's not outside the realm of possibility. It's just more of a how can we make it happen.
I think that is something we could send to some of the task forces and some of the community groups and have it discussed. So definitely thank you for bringing it up, because we'll take that one to the team on a Wednesday meeting and see where we can go.
Hillary Moon Murphy asks, can quests be more like Heroes for High Delve?
I mean, I'm quite familiar with that module, but I'm not sure what she's getting at here.
Hillary, you're still in chat, so can you provide a little more information? For now, we'll move on to Bren Dangerous's question. Are there plans for getting every Pathfinder AP sanctioned?
The plan is to get the vast majority of the Pathfinder RPG adventure paths sanctioned. So that would leave Legacy of Fire and Second Darkness off that list for now. The other thing is that we might take a couple of the ones that we had purposely skipped because of concerns as to how it would be implemented, and we might not return to those. So that would be Wrath of the Righteous and Hell's Vengeance, which allows you to play evil characters. Even if we do Wrath of the Righteous, I still have concerns about sanctioning Hell's Vengeance in a public play sort of way. That just opens up some unfortunate experience doors. However, for the other adventure paths that we currently have, the plan is still, yes, to be getting as many of those as we can sanctioned. With Mike's work on War for the Crown, that gets us nearly current with our adventure paths going forward, and with Linda working on Kingmaker, and then probably looking on to Council of Thieves, that fills in our backlog. So the answer is yes, or as nearly yes as we can make it.
I have a rather more serious question for the two of you. Over the course, and for a lot of this, actually, Paizo's actually been at the forefront of exploring some of these spaces. Over the past 10 years that Pathfinder Society has existed, a lot of topics about consent and content and X cards and triggering content have sort of come back up to the forefront of the community. And as much as I love Pathfinder Society scenario, it has had some troublesome content in its past and over the course of the decade that you all have been making it. Even some content that even your teams have suggested that you wouldn't do again if you were to reapproach some of those subjects. What lessons have you learned there, and how will some of those lessons be actionable in the coming chapter?
From a content perspective, there have definitely been several of these scenarios or several scenes that, have been unnecessarily triggering. Definitely some of the themes of suicide have been toward the top of that. And even over the course of a decade of adventure design, there have been a lot of lessons learned, especially looking at older content, that we say, okay, even if at that time it seemed to be okay, whether we knew it or not, or whether we recognize the problem or not, we recognize that it's now problematic. And that has also been something where our editing team has grown and has become more vocal in helping to police us in case we in our development paths miss something. They oftentimes pick it up as well, and we start to open a conversation and we say, is this a theme that we still want to have in here? If it is, how can we make sure that we are exploring it in a way that is not unduly in your face, or traumatic for somebody who is at the table who's experienced that more directly. And in part, this has been even just opening up delicate themes that we feel are still important stories to tell, but to tell them more from the through the voice of somebody who has more direct experience with them and knows personally how to handle those stories and what he or she is comfortable with. We've started to do some of this with things like PTSD, where when I first joined Paizo, I had a PTSD facing scenario that, looking back, had some issues with it. And in working with with one person at PaizoCon in particular, and opening up a great dialogue there, learning where I had made the wrong assumptions and where we could use that sort of story to tell something a lot deeper and more reflective. And at this point, he's working on one of these scenarios for Starfinder Society. So it's looking out for these voices, these potential authors, and this sort of feedback to try to make it so that we're not completely eliminating certain topics, but that we are approaching them in a much more thoughtful way.
Has there been any thought of introducing something like an X card as part of the default assumption for a play table?
We've talked about it. We've gone to some of the groups that use it and gotten more feedback from them. It's fraught. It's an issue that isn't an easy one to implement or not implement, because we want to be supportive of the community and of all of our players there. At this point, we're looking at, from a community standpoint, stressing the behavior you see is the behavior you accept mantra, and saying that, if it makes you uncomfortable, we need to know about it and we need to address it. And then, but letting communities kind of address themselves, because what is acceptable at a table at home, what those players might be comfortable with, is very different from what is acceptable at a store or in school. But if we unilaterally say from the top down, this is how it's going to be, we're imposing that stricture all the way through. So it's something that the regional venture coordinators and the venture officers and I are having conversations on to see how we can best support our entire community, but in a way that comes off as being one-size-fit-all kludgeonish.
I do have Hillary's clarification for her earlier question.
Mm-hmm.
The High Delve question, the Heroes for High Delve question. She said it had, or she wants some quests to be 2 hours with more story and RP than combat. So Heroes for High Delve had an ideal amount of self-contained story, but was 2 hours, not one.
Okay, yeah. That is not off the table. Right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be launching with some aiming for 1 hour quests. We're familiar with that format overall. But depending upon how these standalone quests work out, then we want to make sure that we can expand to different sizes of things. When we are looking at the experience point system for Pathfinder Society 2nd Edition, that's one of the big components. Is it like, okay, right now it's 3 XP, so 3 scenarios gets you a level, period. Super simple. But if we look at doing like individual quests, then that would mean that we'd have to start providing fractions of an experience point. Is a fraction of an experience point better, or is it better if we like say it's 12 XP to get to a new level, and every scenario gives you 4? I mean, we're still batting that back and forth, but we want to make sure that whatever we do is conducive to doing shorter adventures when that's what's going to fit the story and fit our budget, both in terms of development and financially.
Speaking of the experience question, that's one of the surveys that's up right now is how do you want to see the experience point number spread? So if you have a thought on that one, definitely go in and that survey.
Mm-hmm. Kitsune Warlock in chat is suggesting doing a quest slow track for 0.05 XP.
Oh.
I do have another question about these quests. Since you are going to be producing them more standalone, like you said, like a potential goal of being a quest a month, for groups that do play in a more traditional format where it's already organized, we meet on Saturdays, we play for 5 hours, will there be like built-in support for you can group this many quests together and it counts the same as a slot?
I mean, there'll be sort of an amount of time it takes to play expectation for any given quest, and again, right now we're aiming to do that a quest is approximately an hour. If we do like some sort of 2-hour format, we would probably explore a slightly different name just to have consistent messaging. Mm-hmm. As far as having your group that always gets together for the 4 to 5 hours and never for a shorter period of time, quests can still be something that you could take 3 or 4 of them and play them back to back and still have a perfectly good time. Or if it's a sort of thing where you happen to finish an adventure a little early, then all right, hey, let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and we'll play this quest before we have to run off to the next slot. That's totally an option. It just provides more flexibility, whether you want to squeeze it in between different thing or other adventures, or whether you just want to make an event of gathering for a single quest or 2.
I'm suddenly seeing my super competitive table, seeing if they can squeeze, it's like just hyper running adventures to squeeze them in that way.
Yeah. One of the things, too, this goes back to is the conversation of chronicle sheets and reporting and online and what we're trying to do with our tech department, because you'll see the reporting is going to look different. And one of the abilities we're trying to put in there is to say you earn it from scenario or from quest or from whatever this hour one might come to be called, so that there's different methods of input, which allows us to have more flexibility in how we're giving XP and how going forward.
I think we're about ready to wrap things up. Before we do, where can people find out more about what's going on with Pathfinder Society playtest specifically? And then just where can they follow all the happenings that are going on with organized play?
The playtest is on a banner at paizo.com. So if you come in, it's the first thing you'll see on the landing page. And you can click there to find the adventures, to find the core rulebook, to find the links to the blog. For Pathfinder Society specific and for Starfinder Society, you want to go into paizo.com/Pathfinder Society or Starfinder Society, and that will give you the landing pages for organized play. And we have our blogs that usually come out on Wednesday. We've had a couple of them bumped to Thursday from workloads or just slippage or outages. Understand today's didn't go up on time, so it will go up tomorrow. And instead of saying, "Hey, come listen to us on No Direction," it will be, "Check out the the recording of it." We just had some unfortunate timing there between us and uploading. but it will be there for people to find links to this and to other blogs.
Fantastic.
And is there anything else you want to bring people's attention to?
I do have one more thing. Oh,
Go for it, Tanya.
For me, it's playtest while we are wrapping up the feedback for the actual Pathfinder test. Playtest scenarios are available, and we will be counting your points that you earn from playing them into July. Sometime in July, we take a snapshot and get ready to convert those playtest points into an actual what can I spend these on, and what will my characters look like for the launch at Gen Con. But this is something you can continue to accrue until then. That being said, we also are releasing the playtest demo, and at Gen Con to conventions that want to run it. So if you are an event that wants to run it, request it through your GM scenario requests, and tell me which GMs will be running it, and then I can get it to you.
I'm just excited about a whole bunch of stuff I'm working on in terms of writing. Thirsty and I recently turned over our campaign setting material for Druma, which is going to be the last campaign setting book of first edition, and we are so excited.
Which line is that under?
Campaign setting.
Nice.
So has a product page up on it, and it's open for discussion.
We're definitely going to do a wrapping up first edition and looking over the last few books for each of the lines there in a few episodes, so that one will get some coverage. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us. This has been, as always, an informative and entertaining interview, and I want to thank chat as well, because you kept things on topic. You made up for my my lack of more direct PFS and experience recently. Wow, I fell apart there. I'm sorry.
It's late.
Yeah,
it is. So we're going to be back to wrap things up with a little bit of news and then a couple of plugs right after this. But first, we forgot to tell you that the on-air goodbye is also the full goodbye, because we're going to be moving on with the rest of the episode. So thank you, and we'll see you both in the future and at cons and possibly online again soon.
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back to wrap things up right after this.
and we're back, and Ryan is in a million pieces, but I'll fix that very shortly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 188 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, there is one major bit of news that we should not neglect, and that is that Pathfinder Playtest Update 1.6 has been posted. This is the one that is mostly focusing on classes. Every single class got at least a small tweak. Some of them got major tweaks. Paladin is the one that they call out as the biggie. So if you've been keeping up with the playtest, this update will include all of the previous updates, and I believe it is being called out as the last update that we will be getting. So this is the one that gives us the most complete idea of what the playtest rules are before the next version of the game.
Mm-hmm.
The next version of the game is still going to be significantly different from how they're talking about it. There's going to be further updates, and that there are some changes to the rules, and specifically the math, that they have described as too large in scope to add as like a 1.7 update to the playtest. Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, I'm sure there's a lot of desire to see a better idea of what we're going to get for second edition, other than this 1.6 version of the playtest. We're not getting it. So, I mean, we're just going to have to extrapolate based on what's been said and hope based on what what we have said in surveys that we are going to get a version of the game that we're all happy with.
Yeah, and I imagine they're going to start. You know, a lot of this will be finalized and edited, and then after it's sent to the printers, I imagine they'll start doing like the previews and stuff. So we'll have plenty of meat to chew on, but it won't be direct meat where we get to roll dice about it.
Dungeon Novices in chat asking if this is a short episode. I guess technically, it was an hour and a half interview, and then we had at one point discussed another segment. Param and I have been really working our bones doing other things, so a lot of which is network related and some of which is just life related. So unfortunately, I don't think we have. Do you have a 5 minutes of banter in you, Param? I know I was yawning.
No, I just kind of want to go. I do want to go over the blog, like what the last class changes are, and sort of get our thoughts on it. And that's pretty much all I have left for the day. But it has been a 90-minute episode, gang. And there'll probably be a few more minutes of it. So not super short, but I know you all love our 3-hour episodes, so don't worry. Okay, so to start off with, the Alchemist underwent a whole bunch of more changes, and I'm having a hard time keeping track of all the Alchemist changes because there have been so many, and it's been the class that's seen the most dramatic change over all the editions. But the big one here is that now alchemists are freed from the shackles of resonance completely now, and they have free resources of their own to do their thing without having to tap into the resonance system or the focus system or any of that. And also, like the other classes now, alchemists now have multiple paths from the gate. So Bomb Alchemist was kind of the assumption in the playtest, especially the first version that came out. So basically all alchemists were Bomb Alchemists, and the other class features came later as it leveled up. But now you can be a Research Alchemist or a Mutagen Alchemist right out the gate. And Quick Alchemy is also going to be something that alchemists get for free instead of having to invest in later. That's going to be running theme with a lot of these updates. It's this thing we used to make you take as a feat, we're just giving you.
The thing I'm most excited about the Alchemist is that now you can be the Alchemist you want to be, especially because, and this is kind of a large reflection on how things changed from first edition to the playtest edition, is you used to have freedom, and now you have gates that you have to do things in a certain order, and the Alchemist is really one that was just like, that freedom is back, or a lot of it at least. And I think one of the reasons we're getting a lot of revisions for the Alchemist more than any other class is I don't feel like science has carved its niche in the first in the rule book, so it's being strapped onto the magic system, which is kind of disappointing because the idea of the Alchemist as a core class, I thought it meant that science was going to be a power source, and it was going to be something that was going to be as defined as arcane and divine magic, and here's the base class for it, but eventually we'll get the investigator, and I'm sure there's other classes that use science and alchemy. I know there are.
Gunslinger?
Yeah, all right, Gunslinger counts. Anyway, so I think, yeah, the reason the Alchemist needs so much revision is because it feels like it's being the magical scientist again, which is just not, I don't think it's to the benefit of the class.
It's just, I think there's some validity to that line of thought. It's because this is a core rule book and it's going to introduce so much, it's really hard to find room to carve that out for the Alchemist. And in a lot of ways, I wonder if the Alchemist might have been better suited for whatever this game's APG is, where it would have the elbow room to flesh out science instead of having to make compromises to be included with the first release batch.
Yeah, because as much as we praise the APG, one of the flaws is that the Alchemist is both the Alchemist and the alchemy section of the book. Like, all of how science works is in the Alchemist class. And any other class that refers back to the Alchemist, you have to read that one class to get to understand how every other class. Whereas casters, you just read the magic chapter.
Now,
Barbarian, there's some interesting feedback. They said that people have said that rage is weirdly predictable and static. I don't remember any questions on the survey about that specifically, so I'm wondering if this is something that is being read into some of the survey results. I do like the idea that rage is no longer as static and that it is something that you have to roll to keep your rage going. Otherwise, you become fatigued a little earlier, and you don't know the exact round that it'll happen. And there is an increasing DC. It's a flat check, which I absolutely hate. I hate the idea of the flat checks, and it seems like if they're still in update 1.6, they're not going anywhere. But yeah, so the idea that the Barbarian will be even a little bit out of control of the character, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it audibly reminds. I do support this. I like this change to where it is unpredictable, because the old version did kind of seem like hilariously predictable, where I kept having flashbacks to like old Looney Tunes episodes where a fox and a dog are fighting, and then all of a sudden it's the union break and they all have to stop immediately, have tea time, and then go right back to fighting.
Yes, I can't say I ever got that vision in my head when I was playing Barbarian, but I do know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Moving on.
How are you feeling about the Bard?
The Bard is... They got, like, very little changes. The big thing about its changes is they divorced... they made the muse feats, like, tied to a muse, a specific muse now. And then they introduced the concept of the what they're calling it, the multifarious muse feat, which is basically like multi-classing within your own class to take your other class features. And the way it works out with the feat math is this is actually the exact same thing you were doing. It's just easier to understand now. Like, you're still taking the same amount of feats to get the same amount of powers for the same amount of options. It's just now they're very clearly put into their categories and easier to understand, rather than having to refer to tables and lists.
Now, the Cleric has some of the, I would say, just the strangest update of them all.
Oh, boy. And the most, this is the most controversial of all the changes. And there's some interesting feedback and interesting comments that have focused publicly on some of the public forums from Jason Bowman about this as well. So the Cleric basically got the nerf bat to the face. Instead of having 3+ charisma bonus channels per day, they are now only getting charisma bonus channels per day. So a straight reduction of the amount of channel positive energies they're going to have. And this means for some cleric builds, they have none because it's just charisma. It's very possible to have a cleric and not have any charisma bonus and have 0 channels. So one of your main class features, you just don't have no more.
Yeah, and the fact that the number of spells you get is greatly reduced from first edition. It felt like the idea was that the cleric should not be a caster primarily. It should be much more middle ground. Mm-hmm. And now that it's like you're casting spells, so you need your wisdom, you need charisma for your channel, mm-hmm. and you're also supposed to be competent at combat or something else. So intelligence for skills, or strength, dex, and con if you want to be a combat cleric. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, cleric is the most multi-ability score dependent class that we've seen in the game. And that was something that the second edition seemed to be aiming to get rid of.
Right, and especially, and hilariously, I've actually seen some builds on the new system that shows that the best clerics might actually be 10 wisdom clerics, because under the new system, besides boosting your DCs of your spells, you don't get anything from having a high caster stat because it no longer gates what you're able to cast. So hilariously, pumping your strength and charisma and constitution seems to be a good way to go for cleric, and then just wisdom. A doctor that makes C's is still a doctor, right?
I do want to read verbatim the start of the cleric description in the blog. It says there's only really one feature for one class that you've all told us time and time again is too much. Clerics get too many uses of channel energy. I don't know anyone that's been saying that. I know most people's complaints about the playtest is it's too deadly and that we need more healing options. And while people have been saying it's frustrating that cleric seems to be the only class that you need in the party because otherwise there's not enough healing. That's not saying clerics get too much healing. That's saying there was not enough other options.
Right.
And the fact that this reduction in channel energy, like another argument could be that clerics are too much built around channel energy, but that clerics are getting too much channel energy, and so we're reducing it and not giving them anything else? What?
Yeah, this is a straight nerf to the class. I do think that that's kind of opposite of what I expected. I kind of expected the other healing classes to get a boost, especially since one of the reasons that they're justifying this is the fact that they have the Bind Wounds option now that's available to everybody that just takes the medicine skill. But I don't really think that was super necessary. Also... This kind of ties it back into what I was saying with Jason Bowman on Facebook in the 2E discussion groups where some of the negative feedback for this was hitting. He's put in that they chose the number 0 as an extreme option to try to find where the balance is so that it's not necessarily intended to be 0. So this is another case where he's saying that they went with another extreme option just to stress test the system again, instead of this being what they think will probably be the right option.
Kitsune Warlock in chat, or actually, it's a two-part. So Fiddler's Green PFS is saying, players complaining about too much healing? Interrobang. Kitsune Warlock is saying, GMs complaining about too much healing. As a GM, I'm fine with the party being healed up to full at the beginning of every encounter.
Yeah.
Like,
I am...
every resource but hit points can be depleted at the beginning of an encounter, and that adds stress and adds tension. But I'm fine with hit points.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I think the old school method of play, like that whole first and second edition feel, well, not even second, mostly it was a first in OD&D play a feel of this whole entering long slogs of wounded status and attrition being a focus on play. I strongly dislike that style of play and was glad that 3rd edition threw it out the door, and I do not want to see that style of play reintroduced into the game system.
So one of the other offshoots of this is that with the increase of the medicine skill, is it medicine skill?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the nerfing of clerics is that one of the complaints about this, the complaint that clerics were mandatory for the group has now been replaced by, why would anyone ever play a cleric?
Mm-hmm. Well, clerics are still very good at combat, and they have still a surprising amount of good spell casting. And that's another thing. They did also change how somatic components work now, so that you can use somatic components when you have things in your hands. So now the clerics aren't penalized for having weapons, which was a problem with the playtest. So it does definitely hurt the cleric now that they went from absolutely necessary to, you're not really helpful. But the Mystic and Starfinder kind of has the same dynamic, because the Mystic is the only good magical healer, but Starfinder does such a great job of handling healing in other capacities and other forms of play that aren't healing centric. But nobody complains when the Mystic shows up, because they still have other cool things they can do, and the healing is just a bonus. So I hope the Cleric ends up in that space if they're not going to make them healing centric going forward.
Druid. We've increased good berry healing as well as animal companion armor class opportunities. But the biggest change for the Druid is a major revamp of the Wild Order. Once again, this took a lot of data from all of you, those who participated in the forum. Oh, okay. It doesn't go into the details about how they've revamped Wild Order. Did you dive into, do you know offhand how they've changed it?
No, Druid's not really one of my focuses, but so I haven't dove into that yet, I'm afraid.
Fighter. Fighter is one of the classes they're saying is in the best shape.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's probably the best class in Pathfinder 2 playtest.
All right.
So the big change there is stances used to be open, so you if you were going to enter a stance, you had to do it at the beginning of a combo. which means that you couldn't use other combo opens at the same round you took a stance in, and that was kind of cumbersome and meant that you were waiting multiple turns to get your cool class feature combos going. So now stances, still you can only do one stance per round, but they're no longer openers, so you can take your stance and then begin a normal combo right in the first round of combat instead of having to wait till the second round.
This applies to both the fighter and the monk. And speaking of the monk, they've increased the power of Key Strike.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it was not super powerful, and now it is buffed. And they also made different ways to get in more key pull, and they've added Key Rush and other options to use your key besides just key striking.
That's something I'm looking forward to. I think that the monk got... Anyway, it got a nice coat of paint, and it examined what the concept of the class is and other ways you can explore it, which a lot of these, like, that's the kind of thing I would expect from playtest to second edition, but this is one of the rare times where the class just had room for expansion and a little more flexibility based on an update.
And oh, right. Boy,
Paladin,
big
are you
one.
ready?
Oh, goodness. So Paladin won't be called Paladin in second edition.
Okay, go on.
Okay, the class will have another name. The lawful good... Okay, paladins can now be... Whatever paladins become will be allowed to be any good alignment. So lawful good, neutral good, and chaotic good. The lawful good version will be called paladin. So whatever class path you go down, class specialization you go down the lawful good area, you will be a paladin, and it will play like the paladin that you've played in the playtest with retributive strike happening. The other one, the lawful good option right now is called the Defender, but that will be called Paladin when the second edition launches, according to this. But it's called Defender for now because they didn't want to go back and say, for all phrases the word Paladin, now call it blank. But the other two specializations are being called the Redeemer and the Liberator, neutral good and chaotic good specifically, and they changed the last two edicts of the Paladin Code to match their alignment and goal specifically. They will each keep lay on hands, but their reaction, the default Paladin, you do something bad and then I hurt you, play will change. The Liberator specifically, they mention, will be able to protect an ally and allow them to make a step when they get hit instead, as one of the options. And also the Hospice Knight that upgraded the lay on hands feat is going to be free for all paladins going forward. I think that's a big change. I kind of dig it, though I kind of am also... Like, the only reserve I have on the idea of expanding Paladin's alignment is the fact that Paladin won't be named Paladin. But other than that, I do support the idea of having other options that aren't just the classic Paladin, as long as the classic Paladin is still an option.
So the Paladin is described as the champion of a god, and I think champion is a good name for a class, and then Paladin being a subcategory of champion.
Mm-hmm.
That still works for me. And Paladin has always felt the most prestige class of all the base classes.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a proud nail that I don't mind them pulling out and smoothing over. My problem with it is the Redeemer, the neutral good, just because 3.5 kind of, I guess, taught me that paladins of non-lawful, like, other than lawful good paladins should always just be the extremes. So it should be just lawful good, chaotic evil, and lawful evil. Whereas this, it's here's every flavor of good champion. And it's like, oh, there's a lot of design space that's being ignored for evil paladins, and this Redeemer is going to take some getting used to.
So I actually kind of expected the Redeemer to be the neutral good, because about fairly quickly into Pathfinder, they started talking about the different alignments and how they behaved. And they've, both in the cosmology and in how they've been describing the different alignments, they've always described the neutral good alignment as sort of the diplomat and peacemaker. So seeing them as the one that is most likely to reach across the aisle, so to speak, or the plains, so to speak, and do that diplomatic work kind of fits it within how they've been describing the good alignments for quite a long time now.
Yeah, this is my hang-up and not something I can objectively say as an issue with this build. Not with this build, but with this class. So just someone in chat was suggesting holy champion rather than just champion, and something I was trying to type out now, but I might as well speak to chat directly, is that Paizo has a policy against 2-word named classes, and every now and then there's a portmanteau like Gunslinger, Blood Rager, War Priest, but they do those reluctantly. So if this class becomes named something like if champion becomes the name of the class, it wouldn't be holy champion. It really would be a single word to try and categorize it all.
But that assumes they keep the same rules. We don't.
I don't expect that one to go anywhere.
I don't either, but new edition, new books, new game system.
All right, so that's most of the classes. A couple more. Ranger. Everyone presented significant analysis on the pros and cons of hunt target, and now basically you can hunt target in encounter mode, which feels like when you would be doing the hunting.
Yeah, well, it used to be like when you would hunt your target, you would have to spend your action, like when the fight started, to hunt that target, and there was no bonuses for hunting it while you were still tracking it, and that's when you would activate your bonuses. And so this makes sense. I fully support it. It was a little bit of an annoying feature of Rangers in the playtest, and I'm glad that you can just assume that before the fight starts, you were prepping for a fight.
Atra02 suggests that they keep it a P-named class and call it Paragon. I like that.
Paragon would be great.
Rogue. You've responded extremely positive to the 3 choices of rogue techniques, so much so that we'll feel comfortable expanding them out. Now each rogue's technique has a few technique-specific feats.
Useful. More new options.
Similar to the monk, it just got a little bit more.
For sorcerer, man, the sorcerer might need the most love of all the spellcasters because it has the least unique toys. It definitely feels like the little brother to all the other spellcasters. So sorcerer is now getting diabolic bloodline in the mix for the other side of hell. You know, when you need the different opinion on your evil, which is good, but I don't think was super necessary for the playtest. But hey, we'll see what it looks like. Additionally, they're getting 10th level feats that were previously... That was the level where they made the bloodlines into feats because they wanted to give sorcerer more feats. And make them not forced to always take their bloodline stuff. And so now they're getting feats that let you make all your bloodline spells spontaneously heightened all the time. And I really hope that that's just a test for the playtest to see what it's like if sorcerers have all the heightened feats all the time they want them. Because I really think the way that they're handling heightening of spells with sorcerers is really not elegant and doesn't feel good. I really, really hope that they convert over to downcasting as the primary way of handling multi-level spells. Like it happens in Starfinder and Occult Adventures and some of the spells that got released after Occult Adventures. The basic idea would be if you have a spell... If you've learned a spell at a high level, you can automatically use that by using one of your low level slots to cast the low level version of it. So in Starfinder, for instance, you keep learning new versions of a multi-level spell, but then you're allowed to just get rid of those lower level ones and swap them out for other spells. So if I know, for instance, Summon Monster 4 on my Technomancer, I don't need to also have spent a known spell for Summon Monster 1 and 2 and 3. By just having 4, I can then use my lower level spots to cast Summon Monsters. And I'm still having to invest in the high level Summon Monster if I want to keep that as a high level option. I don't get free Summon Monsters at high level just because I took it as a first level spell. It works great in Occult Adventures. It works great in Starfinder. And I really think that's the method they should convert over for sorcerers in Pathfinder 2, because they're the only class that's having to play by this rule, and they're the only class that kind of suffers for it, because the prepared spellcasters don't even have to do this.
Speaking of prepared spellcasters, the wizard, Param.
The wizard! Okay, so the big change on the wizard is that they're going to get the quick preparation feat for free. So they're going to be able to swap out spells and get new spells. Basically, they're doubling down on the wizard is the Batman. They always have something in their belt to combat situations. And the other big change to the wizard is that they're going to allow you to combine lower level slots to prep higher level spells. So they're going to get a lot of flexibility on what they bring to the table each time. That's a neat change. That's a neat change. That's some of the stuff we saw in the later end of Pathfinder happening. And quick preparation used to just be a default concept for the wizard, so I'm glad that that's not a thing anymore. I think that all spellcasters are really hurt in Pathfinder 2, and I'm glad that they've acknowledged that and are trying to buff the spells up and kind of reverse some of the nerfs they gave to spellcasting to bring them back up to par. Like, I know you and Vanessa talked about this during the last episode when that update happened, but and I'll say again, you know you're in a bad spot when wizards are grabbing two-handed swords, because that's better than their spellcasting. This definitely helps make the wizard a more fun class to play, because it's all about prepping and balancing numbers and tinkering with things, and that's the people that want to play wizards. They want to do that. They want to do the prep, and if I guess just perfectly, I'm going to pull this really awesome combo, but I had to think of it in advance 3 sessions ago. And that's going to reward that style of play. As long as the spells are worth casting, then I like this change to the class.
Well, and the spells being worth casting, we saw a hint of it in the last update, like you said.
Yeah, the damage spells, the non-cantrip damage spells, they really that helped them a lot. I really like that. I think they need to buff the cantrips up a bit too to match, because you're spending 2 actions to send something that's worse than a crossbow bolt out when you could at the same time shoot 2 crossbows. So then you end up wondering, why am I even doing it? So as long as they fix those and fix some of the other problems with the spells, like not lasting longer than a minute for things that are supposed to be out of combat spells, yeah, lots of work needs to be done on the spellcasting.
And unfortunately, something I've been complaining about since the beginning, and one of the things that is honestly make or break for second edition for me, is the idea of tying classes to a lot of just things that were not tied to anything in specific in first edition. Not even mentioned in this blog post. There's the usual illusion that there's some things that there are more things being changed than they are talked about in the update, but I'd love just some update saying, and we're taking a whole bunch of stuff that anyone could take in first edition and letting anyone take it in second edition, and give each class unique powers instead of just locking unique powers to specific classes.
Right. Yeah, there was some hints of that in some of the public comments from some of the developers. Again, going back to some of Jason Bowman's public comments, he kind of hinted at thinking about using maybe archetypes as a method of facilitating that. So anybody could take these archetype feats that would be more general feats, like combat styles and weapon styles. That would be one way to accomplish that goal.
Still less freedom than first edition.
Oh yeah, everything about second edition is less freedom than first edition.
And unfortunately, I'm a player who loves freedom, who loves the ability to explore things, who will sit down with a wizard and say, I could take power attack. What could I do with it?
Well, power attack and then true strike means you're not going to whiff on that power attack.
There you go.
Throw it in with Vital Strike. Grab a feat to learn how to use that two-handed sword, and build. Like, say you were going Eldritch Knight, you would definitely want to have a high strength wizard at first level. Be human, you could take some of those feats. Yeah, you could conceivably make a first level wizard that used a greatsword to power attack Vital Strike yet, but to power attack for impressive amounts of damage right off the bat.
Yeah, and Vital Strike is something I've always avoided as a fighter because I don't like giving up all my attacks. But for a class that very slowly gets the second attack, Vital Strike totally makes up for that. So there we go. We've got, in seconds, we came up with a really cool concept that would be insane, but also insane to play.
Not
and
insane.
That can be a lot of fun.
Not if you look at some of the class builds that were posted on our blog, including the Eldritch Knight build that was posted. Hey,
yeah, that was Randall's contribution to the Iconic Design blog.
Yeah. I mean, he's right. People do often forget about the Eldritch Knight. But even when Magus was being introduced, and I love Magus. Magus is very easy to play. But the people that had System Mastery were pointing out that, hey, technically, Eldritch Knight is better than Magus in just about every way, if you're willing to play the long game.
Dungeon Novice says they like everything codified like it has been. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by like it has been, because they say, I like rules that show me how to do whatever I want versus rules to stop me from doing what I want. So I get the impression the second half is talking about second edition, and the first half is talking about first edition. And yeah, that sums up a lot of my feelings. It's just that so much of what is restricted is stuff we already had freedom on, and I just don't understand, why are they doing that to me? Why are they doing that to the game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you. I really want to see what their final version of this is going to be, because like they have been taking changes into directions I wanted them to take changes in. I just hope it continues. I still have a lot of reservations about the playtest as presented, but I'm hopeful for what it ends up being will be something that we enjoy.
Well, if you look at how spells have changed from first edition to second edition, the idea that they're going to limit the number of spell lists, that's just so much smarter and broader. And it's, instead of having here's all the classes that could potentially take this list, and it's 15 classes, and you could probably make an argument for a lot of the classes that are left off of that list. It's not for 15, because I don't think there are 15 caster classes in first edition. But anyway, it's a long, cumbersome list, and just like...
No, there are.
There are 15 caster classes?
There are more than 15 caster classes, man.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, because there's like 40 classes in all.
9 of the original classes had some form of spell casting. And then all of Occult Adventures except Kineticist. Half of the Advanced Class Guide classes. 4 of the classes in the Advanced Class Guide. Magus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The odd prestige class has its own exclusive list. At least one of the NPC classes has a caster list.
Yeah. There's so much. Yeah, there's probably 25 spell lists. Well, I could tell you the exact number because of Param's spell cards.
There we go.
That has been a nightmare. Just because every time they add a class, I have to redo the infrastructure of the entire program. And then when you start looking at some of those spells, and that tiny little space I gave to put the stat block for the spells before it gets to the description, and then you see that slowly over time it's grown that over half of that is just the list of classes that can cast this spell. So yeah, that was a smart move. I kind of wish that and it's like they did the exact opposite with feats.
With feats they took things that were just like, here's broad, here's nice and simple to implement. No, now we absolutely have to decide which one class gets to power attack. It's definitely not wizard, no matter how much fun Param and Ryan just had making a wizard that power attacks.
Right. Well, right now, to do the same thing in second edition, I would have, and this is some nod to the freedom you do get in second edition that you didn't get in Pathfinder 1. To do the same thing in second edition, I would have to, when I got my class feat for wizard, I would have to take the fighter multi-class feat, and then from that point forward, I could take any fighter feat I wanted. So that's how we would accomplish the same thing in second edition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it just feels like we're working around the system instead of working with the system.
Little bit. All right. So, anything else to talk about or shout out to?
Shout out to, yes,
Okay.
Fantasy Facades by Bannerless Builds is back up on Kickstarter. I shouted out to it a couple of weeks ago when we launched the Kickstarter. We, as in Gregory Bowes, formerly from Chimera Games, he's created these fantasy facades, which are basically like resin backdrops for your 28 millimeter scale game, like Pathfinder. And I've been helping him with the promotion. He launched it on Kickstarter a month ago now, and it kind of limped along. Could have maybe got its goal, but really wasn't looking like it. So took it down. We looked at it again. We looked at a lot of the feedback we got, saw that a lot of people thought prices were too high, saw that we were kind of holding on to some of the sexier options as stretch goals, figuring that would encourage people, and that ended up just being like we didn't have enough sexy options right at the beginning. So it was just like, fine, we're going to relaunch, no stretch goals, here's everything that we could potentially do at launch. And it relaunched, and it's already funded, and Woo! We are we're seeing a lot of progress every day, which is unusual for a Kickstarter. Usually it spikes at the beginning, drags in the middle, spikes at the end. And that's not where we're getting. We're actually getting a steady increase every day. So I've been releasing more of the stress test videos that he and I did of just seeing what kind of a beating these things can take. The first one was me trying to snap it in two with my bare hands, which did not go very well for me. The second one that was posted, although technically the third in the series, is me trying to smash it with various weapons, which was a lot of fun. And the one that just got posted today is just handling regular gaming situations. So if somebody rolls a large piezo die and it crashes into the facade, how well will it stand up? If somebody spills their Mountain Dew on the table, what kind of damage is the resin going to take? And if somebody drops their core rulebook, maybe in anger, maybe just in clumsiness, again, is it going to knock down the facades? So at the very least, I encourage people to check out the stress test videos because I had a lot of fun making them. And watch them once and then watch them again and just watch me the whole time because I am amusing myself with how animated my eyes are in these videos. And then check out the Kickstarter because I really do think Greg has come up with a really clever new product that could potentially really change how you look at your tabletop.
Awesome.
Got a couple of questions that are related to programming, so I do want to handle them both from Dungeon Novice. First one is asking if we are going to be playing second edition, and the answer is we'll see. And then second one, what about Doomsplay? Is Doomsplay coming back? So a couple of things happened with Doomsplay. Episode 1, fine, was recorded and released without a hitch. Episode 2 was recorded over 2 sessions, even though it was intended to only be one. And the first session, the audio was lost. So the second session of part 2 was the more entertaining session, but it doesn't start as though we knew we had lost that audio. So we would have to record something new, specifically saying like, here's the problem. We're picking up from where we left off. We're just releasing the audio that we do have. And then parts 3 on have not been recorded. At this point, I don't have it in me to continue GMing the playtest. That Doomsplay episode 2 killed a lot of my enthusiasm for it. And at this point in my life, when I have to choose between continuing to work on, my house and seeing my family or playing the game, I cannot invest that much time in something I am enjoying that little. Which I have a feeling is going to be something that a lot of Pathfinder fans are going to be relating to. Some of us have been playing this game for 10, 11 years, and with 10, 11 years of aging comes 10, 11 years of added experiences to you. And I think that might be one of the reasons this playtest has not been as positive as a lot of the smaller playtests are, because it is asking a lot more of a community that has a lot less time. Oh, and Kitsune Warlock wants to know what product I was talking about. It's called Fantasy Facades by Bannerless Builds. So if you look that up on Kickstarter, there will be 2. One of them is canceled. One of them is funded. We're talking about the one that's funded.
Yep.
Any other programming notes we need to talk about, Param?
If you are wanting to listen to us play, we are playing right now Seasons Beatings, which is a Christmas special. that Alex Agunis is GMing. The other players, make sure I get this right, is oh my gosh, it's me. I'm one of the players. There is Luis Loza from the network. Jason Keeley from Paizo is joining us to play. And also Vanessa Hoskins has become a player in that. And it is a run-through of his Yuletide Terror adventure that got published last year as a Christmas special adventure. We're going to be releasing the episodes weekly through Christmas, and it probably won't. We're not sure how close to Christmas it'll finish up, but the goal is to get it all released before Christmas. So this isn't an ongoing, permanent actual play. It's just a very fun Christmas special
Mini-series.
Yeah, it's a mini-series, indeed. Other than that, No Direction Beyond is still going strong. We had a little bit of a break, but we're back on regular schedules, and we've had a lot of fun with that, and we're still going strong there.
Yeah. And Adventurous should be making its return soon. A couple of things happened with Adventurous. One is that it kind of took a backseat to the playtest. Mm-hmm. And two is that when we originally put the group together, the idea was that we would record one long session on a weekend day. And Dungeon Novice just asked what about Adventurous as I was answering it. So then I was kind of like, oh, you know what? We recorded that one evening session that really worked for me. Can we switch to that? And like, no, when people came on board, they were like, all right, we could do this as we outlined the schedule, that it'll be a weekend thing. So I've got to move some stuff around to make sure that I can fit in, a weekend a month, which was the original pitch. And we should be able to return soon. The hope was to return in October, but October just happened to be a very busy month for a couple of people, and we just weren't able to find it. I desperately want to get back on a regular schedule. I think something like this lives and dies on a regular schedule. And so as soon as Adventurous gets back on track, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that on my end, there are no conflicts, that we are able to record and release on the schedule that we originally announced.
All right. We've also got recording sessions on the books for RPG Design Club. So once we have a good buffer of content is when we'll be releasing that to the public. We just want to make sure we've got enough content to ensure that several episodes are able to release because of the busy nature of all the people we have involved in that show. Owen Casey Stevens and BJ Hensley are very busy people, so we want to make sure that their chaotic, very busy schedules have enough of a buffer, as well as the network, to make sure we are able to release consistent content at a pace that is manageable. So that's why we didn't release the first 2 episodes, because you would have heard them and then been waiting several weeks for a follow-up.
I think we're about ready to wrap things up. I definitely know that.
Yeah, we're done.
My vocabulary has been desperate for me to wrap things up for the last hour or so.
Yep.
Well, thank you for joining us. No, I already did that part. How do I end an episode? Do I just say this thing? Param?
Well, first we should thank our Patreon patrons.
Please do.
For supporting us in the network and making these shows and all of our other podcasts possible. We love every one of you.
That reminds me. There's something about the Patreon. So one of the backer levels is the unconditioned card. It's unconditional love, unconditional support. And the idea is you get one of the unconditioned cards. We have 2 of them ready to be printed. And yesterday I was even going through the numbers. We have the idea was that each one would be limited time. So I was the first 3 months. You were in the next 3 months. We haven't announced who the following 3 months are, but we were actually at the beginning of that 3rd phase. And so before I print out, I realized that we actually gained a lot of patrons in the 3rd month, which means that there would be a lot of people that are getting 1 of my cards or none of my cards, and then 3 of yours. So I will be contacting everyone, just saying, like, if you're willing, you could swap out 1 of the extra params for Orion just to have a full set. And so everyone that is a backer at the unconditional level, expect an email in the next week, and then I will print out the following week once I get answers from everyone so that I know how many of each to print.
Yep. and the art for these are hilarious. You will enjoy them. We're very excited to get these out to you.
Yeah, and I have not been sharing this publicly anywhere except for on the Patreon, the art, but I am really looking forward to using it as an avatar, but I want to make sure our patrons are the people that get that art first.
Yes,
after
indeed.
us, of course.
Mm-hmm. All right. One thing I want to shout out to, this is a little bit, is on our Discord server. Come and chat with us. A surprisingly busy part of the Discord has become our anime chat, because several of us that are on the network love us some anime. Myself, James, and Alex specifically, and a good number of our fans. And I want to shout out to an anime this season that I had no expectation of being good, and might just be one of the best animes this season.
Wow.
And that is Rascal Does Not Dream of Bunny Girl Senpai. Yes, the name is long. Yes, the name is ridiculous. Forget about that. It is one of the most well-written dramas I've seen in anime since Your Name.
My name?
Your Name is a recent drama anime that has won a ridiculous amount of awards for being fantastic.
Cool.
So go check that out. It's cool. All the streaming services have it, and most of them you can watch it for free.
Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.